Good morning, and welcome to another Seize the Day. Today's Monday, the 23rd, just day before Christmas Eve, and we going to be pretty busy on Christmas Eve. Have let's see, three, five. We have seven services between our three campuses. So we're going to be we're going to be meeting and greeting a whole lot of people. So that's going to be so much fun. Trust you guys are waking up feeling refreshed and ready to begin this new day. We are in our last week of Advent, and I think that we will be from Christmas, from Christmas Eve through New Year's Eve. We probably we're going to postpone our Seize the Days. And then we'll pick it up again in the beginning of the new year. So we give people opportunity if you're visiting with family, traveling. We'll just take a break and then just pick it up again in the new year as we begin our new series with Casket Empty. This year, it's going to be, we're going to begin with the topics of the kings. Kings are found from like First and Second Samuel, First and Second Kings, First and Second Chronicles. You could read through those books, and they'll give you an idea of what is going on in your Old Testament. During this period known as the Kings, when kingdoms are divided, and we're gonna. Unfortunately, it's a time when you see Israel not at its finest, but you'll also see God at his showing his faithfulness in every one of those generations. So looking forward to that. Much to learn, much to explore, and I trust you guys are all prepared. Be great to be in a group. Be great to make sure you get those materials, and if you have them already, then that's awesome. We're just going to continue on through this study. Well, we are in our week 4 of our series in Advent, and we're going to talk a little bit about Ruth today. So if you have your Bibles open, it'd be great to turn to the book of Ruth. One of the things that I shared this past week was there was a video that was shown during the service. It was called Zoom. It was just a short movie clip, and what it did was it took snapshots of a particular scene, and then it would just pull out, and every time it just gave you more perspective of what you were looking at, and it was kind of interesting. And it eventually it pulled all the way out until all you're seeing is the earth, and then just like the earth as it appears as this bright star in the sky. And it just shows you like perspective is so challenging if we really don't see the whole picture, right? And it's particularly true when if you can't see the big picture surrounding your own life, because our perspective is constrained by so many factors. Could be age, experience, geography, health, education, economics, the people you hang out with, the times in which we live. Think about how all of these factors influence the trajectory of your life, and therefore your perspective on life. The way you look at the world as a 9-year-old is much different than you are looking at the world at present. The way you look at the world now as maybe having spent years and years in a particular job, and maybe some of you guys I know have retired, others still working, right? But look at how that has influenced the way you look at your life and you look at the world. And all we have to do is throw in there a couple of experiences that can have built up some scar tissue in one's life. And you can begin to see perspective. It's really hard, right? And then how do we know what's really good, right? What sometimes we could look at things and think that they were really bad when they actually were in God's providence, God using them for something really good. So I was sharing, back in 1987, which is going back a ways now, was the spring of 1987 that I began a ministry in a church in Tarrytown, New York. The congregation had about 47 people, 27 over the age of 70, and there was a need for change. For me, change wasn't about numbers. I mean, I wanted to see the church grow, but I knew enough to realize that God judged success by faithfulness to his word, right? And so what I really wanted was I wanted the church to get such a grasp of what God had been calling us to that it would take the church from, and turn us so that our attention would be upon our walk with the Lord, but also on the responsibility that he was giving to us to draw the outside in. But how do you start? And I was so really new at everything. I just didn't even know. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I just remember as a young guy praying earnestly that God, you just have to show up here, right? And so fast forward, and now it's uh, it's a Saturday, December 23rd of 1989. It was the day before Christmas Eve, just like today. Only this was back in 1989. And on that day, we had a catastrophic fire that destroyed our entire building. It it there was nothing left. The entire inside of the church was completely, ravaged by this fire. Took over 100 firemen to bring it under control. The church was made of granite, and it was thick and it was substantial. But outside of the stone and the roof, yeah, it there was nothing left, and we lost a great deal in that fire. But why I'm telling you that is because I remember back on that Christmas Eve, on that day before Christmas Eve. It was a Saturday, and like I shared with you, the church we had 47 people, 27 over the age of 70, and so because of when the fire happened, a lot of those people they had gone to bed and they were waking up on Christmas Eve to come to church because that was on a Sunday that year, not realizing that the church had burned down. So you can imagine the shock for many as they drove, over to the church only to get there and see it barricaded and it's still the smoke still smoldering up in the air. It was a surreal kind of experience. And you might turn around and say, well, that's bad. But now with some perspective, I would tell you, no, that was good. And that turned out to be the greatest catalyst for growth at Tarrytown. Because what that church did is it put the church on the map. Uh, we attracted over 100 new people, during that coming year following the fire. And so you look at that, you realize, man, that was such a huge growth that came as a result of that fire and what God did, just putting that church on the map for a lot of people. Well, you say, well, that's good. Well, no, that was kind of bad because we weren't prepared for for this new growth. I mean, think about having, no nursery and all of a sudden you have 100 babies. I mean, I personally lack the experience to chart a path to really disciple them. And we had lacked, proper facilities to even accommodate them. We were meeting in a fellowship hall for a couple of hours during a week. And it was just me. Like we needed to recruit help. There's so many things that had to get done. I remember feeling, just pretty overwhelmed. And so you'd say, well, that's bad. But no, that was good because those days forced me to really learn a great deal about God's provision, about God's timing, about vision casting, about fundraising. I grew a great deal in those days because I had to. God had forced the issue, and so you see where I'm going with this, right? There's this ongoing dance of from our perspective, that's good. No, that's bad. And it's only really better appreciated when we're able to see the bigger picture. When you can see how this one, experience of your life fits in with all the others. That's so important. But we're never going to have that kind of view that can make sense of all of the things that take place in our life, which is why I believe it's so important for us to see life through God's eyes, because He alone knows the end from the beginning. And it's difficult for us to see that big picture. But that's exactly what we desire when we're filled with anxiety or fear or discouragement or despair. What can help us to keep, to keep moving forward when the path ahead seems to be shrouded in fog? Well, we began this Advent season by reflecting on Galatians 4 and 5, where it says, when the time had fully come, right, in the fullness of time, God sent forth His Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive the full rights of sons. See, I believe that God is at work in this world, bringing about the redemption that we so crave. God's work is going to go on through us and for us. And so I'd like to illustrate this truth by sharing a story that's found in the Old Testament. It's one of just two books that bears a woman's name. It's the book of Ruth, a story that aptly illustrates the truth that while a man's heart devises his way, the Lord is the one who directs his steps. God is always at work in times of trial and in times of great success. And the book of Ruth displays this in a beautiful way. So let me just, in the next few moments this morning, let me just give you a quick overview of this book. It starts off saying, in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and two sons, it says that they, together with, sorry, I lost my place here. Okay. Together with his wife and two sons, they went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name Naomi. And the names of his two sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to live in Moab. Well, that should show you right off the bat, as you're reading this, that there's a certain crisis here going on. And why do I say that? Well, it says that they're living in the days of the judges, which means that this is after Joshua has taken them into the land. Under Joshua was faithful, but those days of faithfulness, of Joshua's faithfulness, is over. During the period of judges, everyone is doing what is right in their own eyes. And so the consequence of that is that you see there's a famine in the land. Well, a famine, it should be a sign of God's displeasure. Because you remember when God took his people out of Egypt, we studied this in our Casket Empty. God made a covenant with them, with Moses. And he said, if you observe my commands, if you follow the statutes I give you, I will bless you. I will cause the rain to fall. I will cause the crops to grow. I will cause you to be fruitful and multiply, and the same will be even for the beasts of the field. He says, you will live in plenty. Well, if they disobeyed him, God said the rain would cease, the crops would fail. Even they would not um, be fruitful and multiply. And so that was the covenant that God made with them in that period. And so when you read that there's a famine in God's house, something is desperately wrong. And what's wrong is that people have begun to live out this rebellion. And during the period of Judges, Israel would cycle through doing evil, being judged, God intervening, people repenting, only to begin that cycle all over again. It's really a book that if if there's none other, it should just give you a sense that God is in control, but man left on their own devices, they're out of control. And so think about this. The word Bethlehem, it literally means house of bread. And now this little city of Bethlehem, it it's living in famine in times when judges ruled and there's so much instability. So what does Elimelech do? He decides he's going to move. He's going to find food somewhere. And they think the change of geography is going to change everything for them. And so where they go to Moab. Moab is a land that's cursed by God. You do realize that Moab was where Sodom and Gomorrah is found. It was also a place of great apostasy. If you remember in your studies in the book of Deuteronomy, it was also a place where God judged Israel severely because of the way in which they engaged in such idol worship. So you see what I'm saying about crisis? Here's all this stuff happening, like Judges, famine, Moab. It's an interesting way to start a book, especially if you're a follower of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Everything about you is telling you, wow, something is desperately wrong here. But it gets even a little worse because look, it says Elimelech, Naomi's husband, he dies, and she's left with her two sons. The sons will grow; they will marry a Moabite women. What did God say about making sure that you were linked with people who shared the same convictions about who God is, so that your homes would be that much more stable. And here they are marrying Moabite women. They lived there about 10 years, and then her sons also die. So now time has passed. This grieving heart of Naomi over her husband. Now she's left without her two sons. She basically is not only filled with grief, but in this culture, it would have rendered her, outside of whatever savings they may have been able to have, it could have meant that she was now homeless and hopeless, like wondering who's going to take care of her. Like in that culture, you know, um, it would have been very difficult for a widow, and how is she going to make her way? So you see what I mean about how this story starts with all this crisis, but something you'd be tempted to say this is bad, but it actually was good because while she was there, she heard that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them. So this is one of those cycles in Judges, right? That after the people, are being judged by this famine, God brings about this restoration, and the people will eventually repent. But Naomi determines that she's going to return home, And so she leaves with her with her two daughter-in-laws, but she tells her daughter-in-laws it's probably better off if you stay back here. And the consequence of that is that we read here in Ruth chapter 1 verse 16 that Ruth replies, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me." And when Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. See, that's good. Like, she's not going to be on her own. She's on her way, and she just found one who is going to stick by her. And so between the two of them, they will be able to forge their way. But it's not all good for Naomi, because when she gets back, the women in Bethlehem, they're all astir because she's back, and they're saying, "Can this really be Naomi?" And she says, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, because the Lord Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Lord has brought misfortune upon me." See what I mean about perspective? Like, did God not establish a covenant with his people? They were living the repercussions of people's actions. And yet, what's interesting in this text, Naomi means pleasant, and Mara means bitter. And the first thing, like now here she's doing, she's pointing her finger back to heaven and saying, "It's all your fault." Well, that's bad. That's not good. But God is about to bring a ray of hope. There is a relative that lives in the town, and his name is Boaz. And so when they get to Bethlehem, Ruth recognizes that the only way they're going to survive is if she goes out and gleans in the fields. In other words, when the harvesters would go through the land, whatever they did not take, all the scraps that were left, that was what Ruth would go and she would glean those fields. And so she goes out to work, and while she's out there, she winds up falling into the fields that belong to Moab. Moab, the fields that belong to Boaz. And so when she's there, Boaz takes notice of her, but it may be because she was a babe, right? And he's looking and saying, "Hey, who's that young woman?" But I think we have to give Boaz a little bit more credit than that, because when he meets with her, he confronts her in chapter 2 and verse 8, and he says, he tells her, "Listen, I don't want you to wander away from this field." He says, I will provide for you, and you'll be safe here." And Ruth can't believe his kindness. But Boaz says this in verse 11 of chapter 2. He says, "I've been told all about what you've done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother, your homeland, and came to live with a people you did not know." And then not only does he praise her for her faithfulness, but he also prays for her. He says, "May the Lord repay you for what you've done." So for Boaz, he's a godly guy. Boaz recognizes that it is the Lord from whom all blessings flow. And he wants those same blessings to fall on Ruth, a Moabite, not even part of the nation of Israel, but her actions have demonstrated already her allegiance, not only to Naomi, but also to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So when Ruth comes home that night, and her mother-in-law Naomi starts asking her, "Hey, how was your day? Where'd you work?" And she tells them about Boaz. That all of a sudden her ears perk up, because Boaz is a relative, and as a relative, close relatives could act as a redeemer for the family. Part of the law in the Old Testament was that they could step in, kind of like in our families now. Let's say something happens, and a relative comes alongside. I mean, I've known numerous cases where a sister may have died, and another sister came and raised her children. Or I know another situation where the father died, and an uncle came along and paid all the kids, college tuitions. But this was part of the law that God had established for his people so that they could take care of one another. But there was a little wrinkle, because Boaz, while he was a relative and stood in a position to do that, there was also a designated order of how that could be done. And Boaz was not the closest relative. There was someone else, who meant that he had first dibs on making an offer to buy this property. And so when Boaz confronts him, he says that he would do it. So whatever fantasy Naomi and Ruth were conjuring up, that maybe Boaz would come and redeem the land, and also, provide for Naomi, and possibly even marry Ruth, so that they could have children in Elimelech's name. All that seems to be going out, because there's this new wrinkle. Seems bad. But Boaz continues on and tells this guy, "Listen, if you buy this land, you do realize that you have to take care of Naomi, and you will also have Ruth the Moabitess." And the guy then turns around and says, "Yeah, I don't think so. I'll give my right." And so Boaz winds up being that kinsman redeemer. And you know what comes from that? What comes from that is Boaz will marry Ruth. And because of that union, they will have a child. His name will be Obed. Obed will have a son named Jesse, and Jesse will have a son named David. So what began with a famine, living in a land like Moab, cursed, in the providence of God, if you're paying attention to the story, they are living out their lives, but God is also steering and directing their steps. Because notice what God does in what seems like such a hopeless situation. He just brought a child into this relationship that will be David, the favorite king of Israel, and from whom will come the Messiah. So God is working his plan of redemption, even in the most unlikely places, with the most unlikely of people, because God's will never be thwarted. And so you see that God, the perspective is something that God is providing for us as his children. His word is a witness to his gracious provision and faithfulness. It offers a perspective on life for the present as well as for the future. God promises to walk alongside us, to comfort us, to forgive us, to redeem us, to be adopted in his family. Christmas pulls back heaven's curtain, showcasing this one who is the son of Abraham, the son of David, God's son, the Messiah, the Redeemer, the Savior of the world. This gift has long been in the making. It's time for us to discover a little bit more about this heart of God, to pursue his ways, and to faithfully serve him. My friends, I hope that this brief overview of Ruth encourages you in this Christmas season to recognize God's provision. God did it for Ruth. He promises to do it for us. We may not know everything about what this future holds, but we know the one who holds the future. It should bring a sense of peace and calm. It should help us, Lord, to find our way. I trust that that peace is something that you'll discover in even greater abundance. And I trust you guys have a very Merry, Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for being a faithful part. I'll make sure I bring some announcements in this next week, and we'll begin again on New Year's. So, my friends, thank you so much again. Have a wonderful Christmas. If you'd like to know of our times, just go to bethanychurch.com, and there's all the information there for our Christmas Eve services tomorrow. And just go out, seize the day, and never forget that God is good all the time. God bless you. Merry Christmas.